The stage was set for what was supposed to be just another lively roundtable on MSNBC's primetime show America in Focus. The guest list was typical political operatives, journalists, and analysts from both sides of the aisle. But the buzz wasn't about the usual talking points. It was about an explosive teaser clip the network had aired earlier that day. Longtime Democrat strategist James Carville was going to unload the truth about President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. The clip had gone viral within hours. In it, Carville could be seen wagging a finger and snarling, "This isn't just a dysfunctional presidency, it's a performance." Melania's barely present, Trump's hiding behind tariffs and culture wars, and the American people are being duped by a golden facade. The host had promised the full tirade in primetime. It didn't take long for the Trump White House to respond. That same afternoon, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt walked into the Brady press briefing room with her usual steel composure. She wore a tailored red blazer and carried herself with a calm that belied the brewing media firestorm. After addressing the day's news, tariff updates, a new infrastructure bill, and a planned visit to Ohio, she paused, looked straight into the camera, and delivered an unscripted message. "I hear James Carville has some opinions about the president and the First Lady," Karoline said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, I have a few facts for Mr. Carville, facts I'll be happy to share directly with him on live television." The challenge electrified political Twitter. By nightfall, MSNBC had confirmed it. Karoline Leavitt would join the America in Focus panel to respond live. The media went into overdrive. Cable news shows ran countdowns. Hashtags like #CarolineVsCarville and #TruthSmackdown trended within minutes. Everyone knew this wasn't just about political points, it was personal, and as the clock struck 8 p.m. Eastern, millions of Americans tuned in to watch what would become one of the most talked-about live confrontations of the Trump presidency. Carville looked ready for battle. Wearing his signature LSU cap and a smug smile, he leaned back in his chair as the host, Claire Maddox, welcomed viewers. "Tonight," she said, "we discuss the White House, transparency, and what it means to lead. With us are political commentator James Carville and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt." The camera cut to Karoline. She was poised, her face unreadable. Her presence was magnetic. Claire wasted no time. "Mr. Carville, earlier you made claims that the president is orchestrating a performance and that the First Lady is barely involved in his presidency. Do you stand by those comments?" Carville chuckled condescendingly. "Claire, I'm not backing down. This administration is the greatest show on earth. You got Trump tweeting like it's still 2016, Melania vanishing into the shadows, and folks like Karoline here acting like everything's perfect. It's smoke and mirrors." The smugness in his tone drew an audible murmur from the audience. Cameras panned to Karoline, who took a breath, then leaned forward. "Well, James," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I'm not surprised you're still clinging to old narratives. You've made a career out of political theater. But let's be clear. President Trump isn't hiding, he's rebuilding. And Melania Trump isn't absent, she's working on policies and programs that the media conveniently ignores because she refuses to play into their celebrity-obsessed coverage." Claire tried to interject, but Karoline wasn't finished. "You think this is a show? Try telling that to the steel workers in Pennsylvania whose jobs came back thanks to the president's trade reforms. Or the mothers in South Carolina whose children are receiving improved early education resources, initiatives championed by the First Lady." Carville opened his mouth to speak, but Karoline raised her hand slightly. "No, James. You had your turn. Now I'm going to tell the American people the truth." The host blinked in surprise. Carville looked stunned, and that was just the beginning. The studio air was so tense you could hear the soft hum of the stage lights. James Carville shifted in his seat, his mouth slightly agape. Viewers across the country leaned in closer, some with popcorn in hand, others with their phones open to live tweet every second. Karoline Leavitt, unfazed by the pressure, sat with her shoulders square and eyes locked on Carville like a prosecutor about to make her closing argument. "You speak of Melania Trump like she's a prop," Karoline said coolly. "Let's talk facts, James. While your party props up reality TV candidates and influencer-turned-activists, Melania has quietly secured funding for over 30 state-level initiatives addressing online child exploitation. She doesn't need to parade in front of cameras every day to make a difference." Carville tried to laugh it off, but it came off hollow. "You can't be serious? 30 initiatives?" he scoffed. "Name them." Without hesitation, Karoline began listing states: Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Texas, Georgia. "Shall I go on?" Because unlike your side, we don't pretend caring starts and ends with press releases and red carpet appearances. We get things done. Claire Maddox, the host, was taken aback. Miss Leavitt, do you have documentation on these programs? I brought receipts, Karoline said, pulling a folder from beneath the table. But unfortunately, the media rarely asks about the First Lady's work. They're too busy judging her wardrobe or speculating about her marriage. That's not journalism, it's tabloid gossip. The audience erupted in applause. Carville clenched his jaw. Let's be honest, Karoline continued, turning to him again. You've built your persona on being the ragin' Cajun who throws insults like confetti. You call this a show? Then why are people's lives measurably better under this performance? Wages are up. The border is being enforced again. Energy independence is no longer a pipe dream. If that's a circus, give me 3 rings. Carville leaned in, trying to regain control. You're defending a man who launched tariffs that hurt American farmers and started a trade war. Karoline smiled, the kind of smile that told you she was ready for that exact point, and yet farm bankruptcies are at a record low since 2022 because President Trump's tariffs forced long overdue restructuring of trade agreements. You call it a trade war, we call it a correction of decades of exploitation. The audience clapped again. Even Claire struggled to keep the balance, but isn't there concern, Claire asked carefully, that the administration has grown too comfortable antagonizing the media instead of cooperating with it? Karoline didn't flinch. Let's not mistake media critique for media suppression, she said. This administration isn't silencing voices, it's calling out dishonesty. Americans don't trust the media not because President Trump told them not to, but because the media failed them again and again. Russia hoaxes, false leak stories, misrepresented quotes, you've lost the benefit of the doubt. Carville was silent. Not because he didn't want to speak, but because, for once, he didn't know how. Karoline had taken the wind out of his sails, piece by piece, with statistics, confidence, and a firm grasp of Middle America's pulse. Claire took a breath, trying to regain the rhythm of the show. We're going to break in a moment, she said. Her voice a little shaky, but I think our audience is witnessing something rare tonight. Karoline turned back to the camera. What's rare, Claire, is having someone in the White House who won't let political bullies rewrite reality unchecked. The segment ended. The credits rolled temporarily. Backstage producers scrambled to recalibrate, and on social media, Karoline Leavitt was trending #1, far ahead of James Carville, whose supporters were suddenly very, very quiet. What was supposed to be a liberal ambush had turned into a defining moment of political clarity for millions of Americans. The morning after the confrontation felt like a cultural earthquake. From cable news shows to late-night comedy monologues to political talk radio, the consensus wasn't subtle, it was unanimous. Karoline Leavitt had dominated. The headlines spoke volumes. Carville KO'd on live TV, Trump's press secretary comes out swinging, the Daily Patriot, MSNBC regrets inviting Karoline Leavitt after Carville goes quiet, Liberty View. Karoline Leavitt schools Carville with calm precision, Fox News Morning, even normally liberal-leaning platforms like Politico and The Hill offered begrudging praise for her preparedness and delivery, calling her a rising star and a media force unlike any press secretary in recent history. At MSNBC headquarters, the fallout was palpable. Producers were reeling. Some staffers privately admitted they were blindsided by Karoline's performance. They had anticipated a flustered, nervous spokesperson struggling to defend Trump's policies. Instead, they got a strategic communicator armed with data, moral conviction, and surgical precision. James Carville, meanwhile, had gone noticeably silent. No tweets. No podcast clips. No post-show commentary. Rumors swirled that he had left the studio without speaking to anyone, a man known for his verbal fireworks now ghostly quiet, and then came the viral clip. The moment that would go on to define political TikTok for the rest of the week. It was Karoline's takedown line, clipped and shared by millions. You call it a circus. We call it progress. If President Trump's leadership is a performance, then at least it ends with jobs, border security, and a better future, unlike your party's show, which ends in taxpayer-funded chaos and gender studies in Pakistan. Over 70 million views in 24 hours, and the White House was loving it. Back in Washington, President Trump called Karoline into the Oval Office the next morning. She walked in to find him with J.D. Vance, Vice President and fellow populist firebrand, chuckling over the footage on a laptop. Karoline, Trump said, rising from behind the resolute desk. That was one of the finest shellackings I've seen on live TV. Even Hannity texted me, damn. J.D. Vance laughed. You didn't just speak for the administration. You spoke for every American who's tired of being lied to by swamp creatures in expensive suits. Karoline smiled modestly but stayed focused. Sir, they're going to escalate. That wasn't the end. It was the opening shot. Trump leaned forward. Good. Let them. We've got truth on our side. And now we've got you on the front lines. Within hours, the White House media team was greenlit to roll out a new strategy. Karoline on offense. No longer just reacting, she would go out and define the conversation. That meant appearances on all major networks, friendly and hostile alike. CNN, ABC, even The View. The strategy was risky, but it was already working. Independents in battleground states like Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona were posting about Karoline's words. College students were discussing her breakdown of tariffs and energy independence. And suburban moms, once a soft spot for Trump, were resonating with Karoline's defense of Melania's child safety efforts. Even some Democrats grudgingly admitted that Carville had underestimated her at Georgetown University's Political Communications Lab. A group of graduate students held an emergency roundtable. One student said, "She's Gen Z's Kayleigh McEnany, but sharper and scarier to the left because she actually listens before she strikes." But not everyone was celebrating. Back on MSNBC, Claire Maddox faced pressure from network executives who were embarrassed by what had aired. Some viewers wrote in calling it a right-wing ambush, despite the fact that it was Carville who had thrown the first punch. And Carville? Still no public statement. His silence was becoming a bigger story than anything he had said on air. Left-wing Twitter began to fracture. Some demanded he return to rebut. Others said he was done. A relic of the Clinton era, outmaneuvered by a 29-year-old who came with facts, not feelings. For Karoline, the victory wasn't just about defending the Trumps. It was about shifting the narrative, proving that conservative women didn't have to play defense anymore. They could lead the charge and leave their critics speechless. By the end of the week, Karoline Leavitt had become a household name, not just in MAGA circles but in places where politics was once considered off-limits. College dorms, suburban kitchens, even barbershops. The clip of her silencing James Carville wasn't just going viral, it was now being dissected by communications professors and political influencers alike. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did she prepare so well? Behind the scenes at the White House, Karoline's team, young, tech-savvy, and fiercely loyal, wasn't surprised by her performance. This wasn't luck. It was war room strategy. For weeks, they'd been analyzing the opposition's media tactics, developing counter-narratives, and arming Karoline with facts that cut through partisan fog like a hot knife through butter. Aides dubbed it Operation Mirror. The idea was simple. Reflect the hypocrisy of the media and the left back at them. Clearly, calmly, and confidently. If they attacked Melania, Karoline would highlight Jill Biden's hypocrisy on child welfare, while her administration stood by failing public schools. If they attacked Trump's trade deals, she'd reveal how the Obama-Biden-era trade pacts decimated Midwestern manufacturing. If they mocked America First, Karoline would ask why foreign nations were prioritized over Flint, Michigan, or East Palestine, Ohio. She didn't go on offense just to defend. She went to expose, and the results spoke for themselves. That Friday, Karoline appeared on CNN's The Situation Room, sitting across from Wolf Blitzer, a seasoned anchor who rarely lost control of an interview. But Karoline wasn't there to take jabs. She was there to turn the lights on. "You've had 5 different experts on this week saying tariffs hurt Americans," she said calmly. Not one of them mentioned that the U.S. trade deficit dropped by 17% since Trump's latest round of deals. Not one. Blitzer blinked. "Well, we haven't verified that number. It's from your own CNN money database, Wolf." The camera caught his brief pause. Then she turned toward the audience and said, "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be clear. For the first time in decades, middle-class America is being prioritized over Davos elites, and the media doesn't know what to do with that truth." The backlash from the media elite came fast, but it didn't land. Why? Because Karoline wasn't talking to them. She was talking to truckers in Indiana, single moms in North Carolina, steelworkers in Pennsylvania, young students at Liberty and Hillsdale, the forgotten, the overlooked, the patriotic majority. And then came the op-ed that sent shockwaves through the left-wing establishment. She dismantled me, and she was right, by James Carville, guest contributor. The Atlantic. Carville's piece was short, measured, almost somber. I underestimated Karoline Leavitt. I thought she was just another Trump mouthpiece. I was wrong. She knew her facts, she stayed poised, and she called me out with precision. I spent decades weaponizing words. Last week, those weapons backfired. The political world exploded. Fox News hailed it as a historic concession. Tucker Carlson opened his next monologue with, "Ladies and gentlemen, James Carville has left the building." Even Joe Rogan weighed in. "I don't agree with everything Trump does, but Karoline Leavitt? That woman came with receipts and rage control. Impressive." But Karoline didn't gloat. When asked by a reporter outside the White House about Carville's surprising admission, she simply said, "It takes strength to admit you were wrong. I respect that. And now maybe we can have real debates, not staged attacks designed to smear people who love this country." That humility, delivered without notes, without spin, only amplified her credibility. She wasn't just winning arguments. She was shifting paradigms. A CNN focus group revealed that 34% of independents who watched the segment said they were now more open to voting for Trump in 2028, citing Karoline's composure and facts as their primary influence. The tide was turning, and the left, once smug in its media dominance, suddenly found itself without a counterpunch. Because Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive the ambush. She used it as her platform and turned the attack into a national awakening. The dust was settling, but the impact of Karoline Leavitt's unforgettable week was just beginning to show its true depth in Washington. Political insiders whispered that the young press secretary had vaulted herself into a new echelon of power. Her deft handling of James Carville, an establishment titan, wasn't just a viral moment. It was a symbolic passing of the torch. The old guard, with its worn-out rhetoric and predictable attacks, was being outmaneuvered by a fresh generation armed with sharp facts and unshakable confidence. Karoline's rise was no accident. It was the product of meticulous preparation, strategic foresight, and an unyielding belief in her message. The White House recognized this immediately. President Trump, ever the dealmaker, began floating the idea of positioning her for a future run for Senate or even a statewide office in New Hampshire, her home state. "I want her on the front lines in 2026, Trump confided to senior advisors. "She's got the voice, the brains, and the fire. This country needs more Karolines." Meanwhile, James Carville was introspective. The humiliation of being bested publicly by someone decades his junior forced a reassessment. In a candid interview with the New York Times, he admitted, "Karoline opened my eyes to a new political reality. This isn't the same battlefield I once knew. It's sharper, faster, and less forgiving. She's not just a spokesperson. She's a force." What made Karoline so effective was her authenticity. She wasn't a polished politician trying to mask flaws or spin narratives. She was direct, relatable, and unapologetically loyal to what she believed were core American values: family, security, economic prosperity, and sovereignty. Her defense of Melania Trump, for instance, resonated with many who had grown tired of media attacks against the former First Lady. Karoline pointed out Melania's advocacy for child safety and education with clarity and respect, cutting through decades of partisan sniping with a reminder of shared American concerns in communities across the country. From the Rust Belt to rural heartlands, Karoline's message was sparking conversations. Town halls she led were packed not just with Republicans, but with independents and even some moderate Democrats eager to hear a different perspective from someone who spoke their language. Social media buzzed constantly with clips from her interviews, her town halls, and even her moments of off-the-cuff humor. Unlike many politicians who carefully guard their personal lives, Karoline shared her story openly. A young woman from a small town who believed in hard work, faith, and America's promise. Her rise invigorated the Republican base and gave them a fresh face to rally behind, especially younger voters who had long felt disconnected from Washington's stale politics. But Karoline was also mindful of the challenges ahead. She knew that while she had won a major battle with Carville, the war for America's soul was far from over. Media elites, deep state operatives, and entrenched political interests would not give up easily. At the White House briefing room, She began to sharpen her skills even further, readying herself for the next wave of opposition, next round of debates, and next generation of issues facing the country. One thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt had changed the game. She had shown that with preparation, courage, and authenticity, even a young woman press secretary could leave a political titan like James Carville speechless and ignite a movement that could reshape American politics for decades. As she stood beneath the glowing chandeliers of the White House press room, answering questions with her trademark calm and resolve, Karoline knew this was only the beginning. The future belonged to those who dared to speak truth boldly, and she was ready to lead that charge.